Unscripted, unshackled, uncouth.
What you're about to hear is for more mature audiences only.
It's Miguel and Holly, Uncensored.
All right, we've got a jam-packed episode today.
Very much.
We got a lot going on, so we're gonna hit all of our points quickly and efficiently.
Efficient is the name of the game.
That we normally don't do on this podcast.
Oh yeah,
I don't believe it.
We normally meander through. So we have 3 guests today that we're going to be talking to about a host of different issues. But what we do want to start with, and we'll delve more into this on Monday when we have more time, but we have had some requests. And her name was, I think it was Maggie.
Yeah.
Who asked, hey fam, would you be able to talk a little radio biz about what happened with your previous radio station on the podcast? So we'll just give you here are the facts, and then we'll talk more about feelings and reminiscing on Monday's podcast, since we have guests today and we don't want to bore them with that.
Yeah. And I mean, we do still have to be a little careful.
Right. We're just saying here's what happened. Just,
right. From a perspective of it being in the radio industry, this is what happens.
Right. And then just on Monday, reminiscing about, the little video I put together. So yes,
it was such a good one.
It took me 3 hours to do.
I was like, I wish I could do this. And then I thought about how much time and effort and energy you put in. I'm like, that's fine. I'll let him do that.
You should have collabed.
Right. Yeah. So basically what I did is our radio station, for those of you in the Charlotte fam that we came from, it flipped. And that means it changed radio station.
They were just and I was like, oh man, we really got to start from square one here.
Yeah. So every radio station has a format. So the previous station we were on and the station we're on now, Hits 96.1, we are a top 40 or CHR contemporary hits radio station. So we play the top songs. That's why you'll find a Taylor Swift next to Morgan Wallen, next to Nicki Minaj.
Right. It can be weirdly a lot of different genres, but typically it's the lane of contemporary pop music or whatever happens to be. Sometimes it's very hip hop leaning, sometimes it's alt rock leaning, but it's whatever sort of the zeitgeist of the time is, and it's the top Billboard songs. That's what our radio station is, and the former radio station was. And
so we got the news that it changed. It's now an urban.
It's R&B.
Yeah. They call it urban AC. So it's urban adult contemporary. So basically you'll find a lot of old school Bobby Brown, Whitney.
I saw somebody say, I love this Belle Biv DeVoe. I was like, okay.
So they're going towards a different audience now, because sometimes if things aren't financially viable, then they sort of pivot and go to something different.
Right. That's called the flip. They've flipped the format of the radio station, and with that comes the name of the station, the branding. Sometimes they put in a change that. I think you have to do it to the FCC to change the call letters. You just change every single thing about the frequency. The frequency of that old station was 101.5 in Tampa, and it has been other things in the past. Before it was Hot 101.5, it was the Point, which is where the call letters WPOI came from, by the way. We never changed those for Hot, but they're gonna, I think, change them for this new one. So it's urban contemporary, but they're saying, it's like the R&B station.
So it's a sad day for all of us that were part of that community before us. And then, during our tenure there and then afterwards. And it's a really, really sad time, but ultimately it's a business decision. And we've had to go through that before when we were in Tampa the first time, when our station wasn't economically viable. And so it changed from what we were to a sports station, and then that wasn't economically viable, so it changed to something else. And so if that ever came to be here where we are in Charlotte, then they would change it to something else. And so with any business, it has to make sense and it has to make money. And if it doesn't, and it sucks because emotionally we're all tied to it, but the people above who count the numbers and cents, if they're the money coming in can't pay for all the stuff coming out, we got to make a change.
Yeah.
So it's a really sad day. But like I said, we'll talk more about it on Monday, because I know for our Charlotte Platypus Posse members are like, okay, why the F do I care about any of this?
Right.
They do not.
Right. So we'll give you you can skip past this, few minutes of us, going through these emotions on Monday. But we'll give you a forewarning. So Holly, I want you to sort of lead this conversation, because on our show, you are the mental health advocate. Like that's sort of how you describe yourself. So just sort of set us up for this conversation and like who we're going to talk to Fonda first.
Right. Okay. So when we first moved here to Charlotte, Fonda was actually one of the first people I came across on Instagram. And I think she reached out to me. And so this has been a long time in the works to get her on the podcast, and mostly our fault, obviously. So it was interesting because I found someone in Fonda that was so also interested in mental health, but not just mental health. She speaks out on suicide prevention specifically. And I found her story to be so fascinating because Fonda is so passionate about suicide prevention because she was in, I don't know exactly the best way to put it, but I was going to say high risk for actually committing suicide herself years ago. And so, she having gone through literally those depths of like wanting to kill yourself to being and I don't want to tell her whole story, but, having been through that herself, went through this whole entire change around to now become an advocate for people to not take their own lives. And so her message is amazing. She has been all over the place doing interviews, and she's even gotten a bill passed here in North Carolina that has to do with suicide prevention. So I thought it was super important to hear her message on our podcast. Welcome, Fonda.
Fonda, welcome.
Thank y'all guys for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
You're so welcome.
Well, can you sort of walk us through from what you feel comfortable with? So like we end with you got a bill passed. I mean, that's huge. But like take us to like the beginning of like how we get to the end, but how did it begin?
Well, as Holly said, I am a big advocate, and it comes from the heart, and it comes from the fact that I myself am a 28-year survivor of suicide. 28 years ago, I was a pharmacist tech working at Carolina's Medical Center, which is now Atrium Health, and I had no idea I was struggling with depression, which depression is the number one debilitating disease in the world. It's also the number one disease that can cause us to die by suicide. And one thing I always preach is you have to look at culture, because culture matters when it comes to mental health. Because the way I was raised in the Black culture, pray about it. Don't claim it. Give it to God. It's a sign of weakness. And that culture almost killed me 28 years ago. And it's killing us now, because one of the stats is Black males now have the highest rate of suicide out of any ethnic group. And, every day, people have no idea how bad suicide is right now and how bad it's been. So for me, 28 years ago, I was struggling. My son was 12 years old. I thought we were doing pretty good. I had my own place. I was working. And when depression hit me, I don't know how many of y'all have ever had molasses. You ever had molasses? You ever had molasses? Well, molasses are thicker than honey, and they're thicker than syrup. And when I was a little girl, my grandma used to make homemade biscuits, and we'd take butter and put it in the molasses and spin it around. And then we'd take our biscuits and slide it across. Well, molasses are so thick, it would break those homemade biscuits. And then you would have to take great effort to take a spoon or a fork and scrape those molasses and put it on. And that's what I felt like I was walking in when depression first hit me. I was walking in molasses. Every movement I made, from talking to walking to trying to put my clothes on, it took great effort. I was extremely tired. And so I had no idea what was going on with me. My eating changed. I was not eating. I'd go 3 or 4 days without eating. And then when I'd eat, my stomach had shrank so bad that when I'd start eating, it would be hurting. My appearance changed. I take great pride in my appearance, and my appearance changed. I wasn't putting makeup on. I was barely taking a shower. My work suffered, and my personality, I'm very outgoing, very bubbly. My personality changed. I didn't want to be around anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And one of the things I always tell people is isolation is not your friend, especially when you're struggling with a mental health condition. Because when you're alone with those thoughts, especially when you're already struggling, those thoughts can turn into action. And that's what happened to me on February 14th, 1995, a day of love, a day of, celebration of love. I had a plan to take my own life. My apartment was immaculate. I wanted to have it where Wesley, my son, wouldn't come home to find me. My brother would find me. And I always tell people, because I'm a certified trainer of suicide prevention, and I always tell people, I say, I know people sit there and like, how could you sit up and want to take your own life and leave your 12-year-old son? Well, this is what I always tell people. Number one, 90% of people who die by suicide have a treatable mental health condition. Treatable. And you know why we don't get help? Because every time there's a mass shooting, mass murder, who gets blamed for it? People with a mental health condition. It runs across the screen, mental health. And then people call us crazy, nuts, psycho, cray cray. Even the terminology, commit suicide. I tell people, please don't use that terminology, because before 1971, it was a crime to take your own life or even attempt suicide. And they criminalized suicide. So please do not use that terminology, commit suicide, because when you use that terminology, you're criminalizing an act that we know now that a lot of people who die by suicide have a treatable mental health condition. You can say died by suicide, kill themselves, completed suicide. One of these days, I hope we don't have to use any of that. So for me, on February 14th, I had it. But before I did that, I said, you know what? I got to reach out to somebody and let somebody know the pain I'm in and what I'm going through. And I always tell people this: everybody needs an Aunt Spanky. Everybody needs to be like Aunt Spanky. My nickname is Tweety. Her nickname is Spanky. And I call my Aunt Spanky. We're 3 years apart, but she's been more like my sister than my aunt. And I called her, and all I remember was telling her, you can have my shoes. That's all I remember. She called me back, because that's a sign. We're giving away prized possessions. It doesn't have to be money or jewelry. It can be something that person values and they want you to have it. You need to ask them what my aunt did. So we hung up. She called me back. She said, are you going to kill yourself? And I said, yes. And she went into action like a superhero to save my life. Now, I didn't know what she was going to do that day, but later on that afternoon, I wasn't able to implement my plan. And I'm going to tell y'all something. That pain in that moment when we're suicidal, I can't even explain how excruciating that pain is. And it's from the top of our head to the bottom of our feet. And we don't want to die. We just want that pain to go away. And we feel like in that moment that if it's not going to go away, we're going to have to live with it. And we don't want to live with it. So that afternoon, I wasn't able to implement my plan. Wesley came home from school and I said, you know what? I'm just going to order pizza, because I kind of snapped back to who I was, because I knew pretty soon my pain would be over with. And before I could order pizza, it was a knock at the door, humongous CMPD police officer. And he said, are you Fonda Bryant? I said, yes, I am. He said, well, I came to take you to a mental health facility. I said, no, you did not, because I had already been going outpatient. And I was like, what is going on? So I went up the stairs to my bedroom, trying to get away from him. He came right up behind me. And Wesley, my son, it was 12 at the time, he came right up behind me too. And when we get up there, we start fussing. He's like, you're going with me? No, I'm not. And then he did something I always tell people to do not to do when I'm training people how to help somebody who's suicidal. Don't put your hands on us in that moment, because in that moment, we're not thinking clearly. We can be in a psychosis state. We could be hallucinating. Don't put your hands on us. But what you can do, because we could hurt you, you could hurt us, we could both get hurt. So what you do is you stand at a distance and you stay calm. You don't curse us. You don't yell at us. You don't call us names. And you let us know, hey, I'm here to help you. Let me help you get help. We can get through this. You can get better. Because when that police officer, and I'm not violent, don't smoke, drink, never done drugs, when he put his hand on my shoulder, I scratched him. And when I scratched him, he grabbed me by the back of my neck. He shook me extremely hard and threw me in handcuffs. And if it wasn't for my son, who was 12 at the time, saying, Mom, please calm down. You need help, I could have gotten seriously injured or killed, because we hear about that. But thank God we now have police officers that can help us with mental health, called CIT officers, crisis intervention team officers. So by then things had gotten out of hand. He aggressively took me down the stairs, and there was my Aunt Spanky. And I don't curse either, but I was calling her names, telling her how much I hate her. And this is what makes my Aunt Spanky such a hero. And she doesn't believe she is, but she is. Because in that moment, y'all got two choices. You can help us, and yeah, we might get mad at you, might not ever speak to you again, but we're alive not to do that. And eventually we'll get over it because me and Spanky are as tight as ever.
Right.
But if we don't, we're still alive.
Mm.
Or you can do nothing and you can go to a funeral and risk the why pain. And you know what the why pain is? Why didn't I reach out? Why didn't I check on them? Why didn't I know the signs? Why didn't they reach out to me? Why? And that why can eat you up. So the end of this story is, after all of that, it took me a while to get over, because that's trauma. Every time I share this story, it's trauma. But it's worth it to me if it's going to save someone's life. So I went out to the psychiatric hospital in handcuffs, which was right across the street from Carolina Place Mall. And Taco Bell was in the front. And when he got me out there, I was looking around and I wanted to run. But I knew if I did, he'd tackle me and I could have gotten hurt. And I was already in handcuffs. So you know how movies and television portray psychiatric hospitals that we're in straight jackets, hair standing all over our heads. We don't even know what day it is. That's not how it was at all. When I went in there, they check your vitals. They make sure they take your belt. If you have on a belt, they take your shoestrings, make sure you have nothing in your pockets. And I was put in a room that was no different than if I was at Atrium Health, Maine, except it had a reflective mirror, not a glass mirror. And when Spanky came out there to bring me some clothes, I told her I didn't want to see her, but she brought me a picture of my son, because Wes and I are really tight. And so when they bought it, it was in a glass frame. They took it out of the frame because they don't want you to break it and hurt yourself. And I was out there for a week. And while I was there, I was diagnosed with clinical depression. They took my blood. There's certain mental health disorders. They can take your blood and find out what you're dealing with. So I also tell people too, if you're dealing with a mental health condition, please don't go see your general practitioner, your gynecologist, your cardiologist. Go see a psychiatrist so you can get a correct diagnosis and get on the correct medicine. Now, do they make mistakes too? Yes, but that's where you start. That's where you start. And so this is a kicker, what I was telling y'all about culture. So I'm my mom's oldest child. If I would have had a heart attack or a stroke, my mom would have been on the first thing smoking to North Carolina, because she's remarried and lives in Savannah, Georgia. But because it was a mental health condition, because it was a suicide attempt, she didn't come. She didn't come see me when I got out. And when I called her on the phone, the first thing she said was the rally cry, Black people and people of color. Yeah, just need to be stronger. See, I don't like people calling me a strong Black woman. I don't like that, because what does that mean? I have to internalize what I'm dealing with. I got to put on that face like, yeah, I can save the world. I can raise my son. No, real strength comes from getting help. Real strength comes from saying, I need help. And real strength comes from getting the help and putting in the work every single day. Every day. I cannot take my foot off of this disease, because if I do, I could end up still dying. And that's terrifying to me. So I tell everybody, this is just my philosophy. Medication is a tool. If we have to take it, we have to take it. Therapy is a tool, but don't expect the therapist to fix your life, because that's not their job. You have to pull those good coping skills from your therapist. And as I say, a mental health toolbox. I have an imaginary mental health toolbox. So the two biggest things that help us the most are self-care, knowing our triggers, knowing our boundaries, eating right, exercising, volunteering. You got to put those things in your mental health toolbox beforehand, not when you're in crisis or not when you have a bad day. Exercise. All of those things help us. And the other thing, you got to have that educated support. And I'm not talking about going to college. I spent 6 years, 2 terms on the board of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. There's one in every single state. It's a national organization. And then we have affiliates. I tell everybody, if you have somebody that you love who's struggling, get educated. Get educated. Go to those NAMI sites. They have every single mental health disorder listed where you can read about it and find it. And then my educated support is my Aunt Spanky and a couple other people. And I can call them at 3 o'clock in the morning. And they're not going to say, Tweety, why are you calling me? They're going to listen without judgment. Remember that, without judgment. And they're going to make sure that I'm okay. And if they have to do more than just listen, they're going to do that. So that's just my philosophy. When I left that hospital after a week, I turned around and I told them, I said, y'all know what? I don't know how I'm going to live with this disorder, but I'm going to live with it. And one of the things that I learned the most out of all my years of being a survivor of suicide is what my therapist said in group therapy 28 years ago. She asked me, she said, Fonda, who do you put first? I thought that was the strangest question. I said, my son, he's 12. She said, wrong answer. She said, when you get on a plane and that bag drops, what are you supposed to do?
Put it on yourself.
Exactly. So you can help somebody else. Now, it took me years to learn self-care, but now self-care is number one, because if I don't take care of Fonda, I can't help my son, I can't help myself, and I can't help the people that I'm out here advocating for and helping, because mental health is such a stigma around mental health. A lot of people are terrified because they're worried I'm gonna lose my job. People are gonna look at me differently. So I don't mind being their voice. I don't mind it, but I have to make sure that Fonda Bryant is okay. And that's where it's come to this point, is making sure, setting boundaries. Because one day I was sitting in my car and I was looking at the big Tesla batteries in the parking lot of Walgreens. And I looked at that battery and I said, you know something, Fonda, you're that Tesla battery. People come to you all the time and they'll drain your battery and they still won't do what they're supposed to do. Right. You'll give them resources, everything. Month or two later, well, Fonda, and I had to learn that. I can't save everybody, and I can't care more about your mental health than you do. So that's my story, and that's where I am now. And I'm so proud to be here. And I never take for granted that I'm here. I never take it for granted.
Incredible story.
I mean, that is just, there were so many times you telling your story where I got chills. And by the way, from a radio person, excellent storyteller, because there was not one point where I was like, right, seriously, I was like,
not one stutter.
Literally. Think about, guys. I've been doing this for so long. It's just natural. It's just a natural thing. It's just natural.
I want to helps the message. Yeah.
Seriously, I want to bring in Marcus because he works in it, and he's also African American, and so I feel like I love that, especially from my world being, Black too, and growing up in Atlanta and growing up in the church, how that was such a big part of, what we learned about, be strong and be okay. And it's like, well, no, you have to learn how to ask for help. I think he got a phone call or something. Let's see if he's here. There we go. Hey, Marcus.
Hey, good morning. How y'all doing today?
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, Marcus, I saw you nodding as Fonda was telling her story and sort of identifying with, being in the Black culture. And when it comes to mental health, that is not a priority that our culture has taken on. So can you walk us through like your background and sort of explain what you do? Because you're a Miguel and Holly fan member here in Charlotte, and you started tweeting us, about Blown Off and stuff like that, and start letting us know about all the mental health services that you offer here in Charlotte.
I was going to say, because Marcus is actually a licensed clinical social worker and has a couple of different, I would say, practices, I guess, or spokes into the community to help.
Yes, definitely. Thanks for having me, for sure. And my kids gonna think I'm a superstar after I show them this, because they listen to the show every morning. So when I tell them I'm talking to you guys, they're not going to believe it. But definitely, here in Charlotte, like I said, practicing mental health. This is be my third year. I'm coming in this summer, and my why and the reason why I wanted to pursue mental health, because I grew up here similar to Fonda, just having so many stigmas as a child, being diagnosed with ADD, dyslexia, being retained in the 6th grade, not really knowing what to do, feeling like you ever been in a classroom and everything sounds like it's from a different language, like not understanding what's going on in the classroom, which built up anxiety when I was in the 2nd and 3rd grade, because I was nervous to take tests. I was nervous to read publicly in the classroom, or show my test. My peers have 100 on the test, I might have a 30. So then that led to the debate, right? And I'm in elementary school, so by the time I got to middle school in the 6th grade, I was retained. So I was retained because I was so behind amongst my peers that they could not promote me to the next grade. And then that is when the behavior changes. Now I'm acting out, because now it's like, well, I'm not as smart as my peers, I'm telling myself. But at the same time, I don't want to be portrayed as weak. So that's when, after you get retained one time here in Make America, they're only going to retain you one time. They're going to start passing you along after that. So I didn't get retained again, but I was still behind. But now I'm playing sports, so I'm getting some confidence outside of the classroom because I'm good at sports. So now I'm playing football. I'm really good. But in the classroom, I'm still behind. So it's kind of balancing out. But
It's
then
11
again,
o'clock.
right, it's still tough, right? You still have that anxiety and that, that fear of failure. So that's when I joined the game here, because here in Charlotte, I started actively game banging, because I'm like, you know what? Maybe if I can get a group of people behind me, I'll feel more confident, right? I'll feel more protected. People won't tease me because I'm a part of this game, and I feel like nobody will bully me. So that became with a lot of challenges itself, because now I'm doing things that's putting myself at risk, right? I'm doing things in the community that's putting my family at risk. And then from there, I met a school social worker, and that changed everything, right? That changed everything, because he started to pour into me. He started to let me know, okay, well, you're not as behind as you think you are, right? You can read, but you're not trying, right? You can read. You're saying you're not good at math, but you're not applying yourself at math. And then from there, I end up going to college, and the rest was history. And then when I was able to go to college, I was able to learn, started using resources. And from there, I said, you know what? Since God gave me an opportunity to continue to move forward, when I get the first opportunity, I'm gonna pass this back in my community. So now I'm currently a program director here in Mecklenburg County for individuals who have a primary mental health diagnosis, but also experiencing chronic homelessness, because that's a big thing here in Mecklenburg County. As we know, the housing market is through the roof.
Yeah.
But we have a huge homelessness population that is unaddressed. So our program is taking individuals that's here in Mecklenburg County, housing them for 2 months, giving them the skills, because a lot of these individuals who have been homeless for 3 years, they don't know how to cook. They don't know how to wash their clothes. Like, a lot of these people never owned their own home before. So this program, we're giving them an immaculate parking apartment. We're giving them tools to learn how to cook, clean, take care of themselves. And then when they're done with that program, we're giving them a housing voucher to live independently. And this is all funded through Mecklenburg County. This is the only program here in Mecklenburg County that is offering this resource. And I was the first individual to be the captain of this pilot program. And from there, like I said, I'm also still working with youth, gang intervention, and through my outpatient services that I provide, because I do outpatient on the weekends, during the evenings when I'm not in the office here.
I think what I find fascinating about Fonda's story and Marcus's story, and the sort of, needle that you could put through both of these stories and thread them together, is that so much in our lives and our society, we just are taught to just keep moving forward, keep going forward. And we never
put your head down and keep moving.
Yeah,
and keep doing it. And like, Fonda, you were just, let me raise my child. Let me go to work. Marcus, let me just keep going to school. But we never take the time to actually stop and go, wait a minute, I am not okay. Can both of you tell us quickly, like, because of this, and there's so much going on in the world, we came through where we all thought the world was going to just implode upon itself during COVID, and we've never really dealt with that. When does someone who's listening to this podcast, when should they go, I need help? I need to pull the cord, and I need to say, I am not okay. Because like you said, Fonda, you were just going and not realizing, what was happening. When do you pull the cord?
And I think,
Fonda, you're on mute.
You're mute. Oh, that's okay.
This is something that I always stress, because I do a lot with high school students, college athletes, and things. One of the things I always tell them that we have days where we're depressed. We all have days that we are full of anxiety. I deal with anxiety too, because look at what's going on in the world right now. So this is what I always tell people. If it lasts for more than 2 weeks and it starts interfering with your everyday life, like it did mine, you need to go talk to somebody, because it's going to get worse. And this is what I tell people, especially with Black people in our community. Sometimes I have to outsmart them a little bit. So I'll tell them, because, diabetes and hypertension run rampant in the Black culture. So this is what I tell them. I said, well, if you had diabetes or hypertension, would you go get help? Oh, yeah, I'd go get help. Would you take medication? Oh, yeah, I'd go take medication. Because if you don't, what's going to happen? It can kill you. It can kill you. So that's the same thing with a mental health condition. If you ignore it, and see those signs, it can lead you down that path of death. And this is another one of my philosophies. Death is the ultimate for us if we don't take care of an undiagnosed or untreated mental health condition, but it can cause other things: poor decisions, bad judgment, incarceration. Our prisons and jails are full of people with mental health conditions. And the other thing, self-medicating. Y'all heard me say, I have never done drugs and alcohol. And I used to turn up my nose at people like, oh my God, I never done that to deal with. I deal with my problems head on. But when I got educated and became an advocate, I realized that there are other things that you can self-medicate on that can be just as dangerous, just as deadly, and can get you killed. Gambling, sex, pornography, excessive working out, excessive eating. See, like I told you, never done drugs and alcohol, but I started having sex at age 13. By the time I was 16, I had a baby. She passed away. And that was very destructive behavior for me until finally the light bulb went off. And I realized that my self-medicating was every time something would go on with me, I would end up going and fooling around with somebody. And that could have put me in a very dangerous situation or got me killed. So I tell people all the time, self-medicating is not just drugs and alcohol. It can be other things that can take you down the same path and destroy your life. So if it lasts for more than 2 weeks and it's interfering with your everyday life, please, please reach out and go and get some help. Please.
Kelby?
Fonda, you talked about earlier within your story about, going to a psychiatrist and possibly taking medicine for people who are depressed. Something that I've thought of doing, but I'm kind of intimidated by it. I've always heard not horror stories, but maybe people not feeling so comfortable with it, and maybe it kind of has a few side effects. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I've taken medication and I'm not taking it right now. I work out 3 to 4 times a week and that's my medication. But guess what? If I need to go back and get on my medication, I don't have a problem with it. Y'all ever watch commercials, how many side effects there are with every single medicine that's out here? Sometimes you're like, is it really worth taking? Good Lord, there's more side effects than it's going to be helping me. So I just tell people, if you're thinking about taking a medication, just like with everything else, do your homework. Do your homework. Just like with a therapist. I tell people all the time, if you go to the first therapist and it's not a good fit, then keep going until you find that good therapist that you have a good rapport with. Because in the Black culture, they're always saying you need to go somebody Black. And I can understand that to a certain degree because they understand our culture and what we're dealing with. But guess what? All Miss Fonda's therapists have been white males. Until recent, until the last couple of years, I have a Black male therapist. So just like with medication, do your homework on it. With mental health and with me dealing with depression, I read up on my mental health disorder. What new medications do they have? What kind of research have they done? So do your homework before you get on medication, but don't be afraid to take it. And even if you start taking it, it doesn't mean you got to take it forever.
Right.
But do your homework on it and don't be afraid to take medication. Because like I said, if you had diabetes, hypertension, you wouldn't hesitate, correct?
Right.
So be the same way with mental health. Be the same
way.
And
I want to say this too as a caveat, because I have ridiculous personal experience in this realm, is that make sure when you go to a doctor, if you are going to a psychiatrist, because there's a difference. There's psychology and there's psychiatry, the two branches. One is like talk therapy, and psychiatry would be more along the lines of medication. When you go to a psychiatrist, they should be sitting down with you for an hour before they prescribe any medication. They should not meet with you for 15 minutes and go, oh, I think you got this, go take this, go get this filled. And I mean, why, if you didn't know to sit down and have a talk with someone for an hour, you would never, you were like, oh, this person is a doctor. They know. They don't. There are people that will, unfortunately, they don't really care that much. I don't even know why they're in this profession.
Exactly.
You have to be careful. And what Fonda was saying was do your research. What are the side effects? And do I feel right? Like, is this medication making me feel very wrong? And what are your friends and family saying? Are they suddenly like, well, you seem different in a bad way. It might not, that medication might not be the best one for you. Maybe there's a different one, but the person that's prescribing it to you has got to sit down, get to know you, even maybe over 2 visits before they prescribe something. And so I always recommend go slowly on purpose and make sure that doctor has your best interest and gets to know you as a human before they prescribe. Okay.
I agree with that 100% because we have people in the field. Just because they're in the field doesn't mean they care about us. I've heard psychiatrists, psychologists, and therapists calling us crazy and making fun of us. And see, those are people we don't need. But she's right. Make sure that you get to know that person and they get to know you instead of saying, oh, okay, you got these symptoms. Here's your prescription.
Yes.
I agree.
Could be very dangerous. Anyway, so but Marcus, yeah, I wanted to make sure we focus Miguel's question on you too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I always tell everybody, like, you don't have to be in a bad space to have a therapist. You could, a lot of times we run and try to treat our mental when we're in emergency, right? So then now we're in panic. We're trying to, but when you're well, you can still be able to practice mindfulness, which is a DBT, dialectical behavior therapy technique, right? That's similar to things like deep breathing, yoga, etc. Like just staying present in the moment. So these are things that you could practice day to day. I have a therapist and I'm a therapist, and I'm always, even when I'm up and down, I'm gonna still have my therapist, because my therapist helps me get through the day. It helps me get through the week. And it also gives me the lifelong skills to work through any emotion. So when it's sunny outside, I have a hat. When it's rainy outside, I have an umbrella. I have a tool for every emotion, every state of mind. So that's what I tell individuals. Just go find a therapist that's right for you. And that individual will help you reach your personal goals and help you develop the tools you need to stay healthy, right? And with children, sometimes I think we're quick to prescribe children medication because that's what, pharmaceutical companies say. Like, if your child can't behave in the classroom or pay attention, this is what the medication. For me personally, I never took medication in my whole life, right? But when I started to learn tools in college, like I got 4.0 in undergrad, like in grad school, like 4.0s, and people would never guess. Like they started calling me a nerd, and I'm like, when did I become a nerd? I did not, like, and you must didn't know me in middle school, but when I started, right, like I'm like, what? But when I started doing small things like just organization, like organizing my binders, right, like time management, writing things down. That changed my whole study habits, my whole life, because I'm able to, even today as a professional, like I have to do things a certain way because I do have ADD and I do have dyslexia. So sometimes I might process things backwards, and that's okay. So, but I know with that, I have to exercise every day or I'm going to be all over the place. Like if I drink coffee, like I drank coffee today, so I'm surprised I'm not jittery out the building. I got a little bit of energy, but you all over the place. I probably would have been standing up, but I know exercise, organization, and time management is important for Marcus, because if not, then he will have a hard time with balancing task and organization, and that may lead to me submitting things late, etc. And then that's when the anxiety pops in and the depression, because I already know my cycles, right? I know what that looks like for me. Knowing how your brain operates and knowing how your brain works is very important too.
Yes, for you and everybody around you. Yeah,
100%. But before we close out, I wanted to sort of ask both of you, because I know we have a lot of parents that listen to the podcast, and especially as a lot of them get their kids to their teenage years when their hormones are all over the place. Do you all, and if you don't, that's totally fine, because I know, Marcus, you deal with teen or athletes. What are signs that you look for to know if my kid is just being a hormonal, angry teenager, or I need to be concerned? Because I was just listening to a podcast where they were saying that Gen Z are some of the loneliest kids because of all the technology they've grown up, because they've gone through the pandemic, and now taking it to Holly's daughter, who's 10, who will be entering those years shortly, and they've gone through and they've been normalized with the pandemic, and super even more so than millennials and Gen Z with the technology. How do we know, and what do we look for to make sure that we're making sure that they're okay?
Well, you want to go ahead, Marcus?
No, go ahead first. I'll go second.
Well, I worked at a high school, and like I told y'all, I do a lot of work at a high school, and I went there to do school-based COVID, but it turned into way more because they already knew I was an advocate. So one of the things is my office was full every day with students telling me, Miss Fonda, I'm suicidal. Miss Fonda, I'm going through stuff. So this is the biggest thing I tell parents all the time, even when I do the QPR suicide prevention training. Listen to your children without judgment. I know it's hard because I'm a mom. I know it's hard, but you got to listen to your children and hear what they're saying, because so many of them came to me, and this is some of the things they would tell me. Miss Fonda, I can't talk to my parents. Miss Fonda, I've gone to my parents to tell them I'm struggling. And they'll say, especially parents who have means like, money, nice house, whatever. I've gone to my parents and told them I'm struggling, I'm depressed. And they said, what do you have to be depressed about? You got a nice house, you got a nice car. So they equate happiness with material things. So this is what I tell parents again, listen without judgment. Some of the signs you need to be looking out for: are they eating? Are they isolating themselves? Are they talking about giving away things? Are they not being the person that they were before? Remember when I told you my looks change? And see, I'm gonna tell y'all something. One of the things that makes me such a good advocate is I'm very transparent. I don't mind sharing my story or telling whatever. And one of the things I tell kids, I should have been dead as a teenager because I was struggling. Now these kids have the opportunity to get the help, and that's where parents have to come in. If you see those signs, quit taking it personal, like, oh my God, my child cannot possibly have a mental health condition, because we also know that mental health can be hereditary. I had no idea that depression ran in my family until I almost killed myself. Let's not wait until your child gets that way, because here is a terrifying fact, a stat. The second leading cause of death for young people in this country, 10 to 34, is suicide. That is the second leading cause of death, 10 years old. So again, listen without judgment. Hear what they're saying and let them know, no matter what you're going through, from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, I'm here to help you. I love you. We're going to get the help and you're going to be okay. And let people know that mental health is health. Mental health is physical health. And this is the most important organ, the most powerful organ in our bodies. And if it's not working well, nothing is going to work right. When my grandson was 5 years old, I taught him that the brain is a computer of our bodies. And if it goes down, everything will go down. So have that conversation and normalize it, because a lot of reasons why kids don't come to you in the first place for mental health is because, oh, they're crazy. What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with you. So my biggest thing is, don't be judgmental and listen without judgment.
Marcus?
I would definitely, just to piggyback, just know your child, making sure that I do a lot of psychoeducation with my child. I have 3 small children, 6, 7, and 12. So they know that dad is a big fan of mental health. We talk about what.
Oh, we lost Marcus for a second.
No, hopefully he'll get back.
Maybe he'll come back. It's just the circles going.
Wait, hold on. We got another marker. Hold on.
Oh,
we're gonna take that. There we go.
Okay.
Oh, he got on his phone.
Got it.
Yeah, right. I was trying to save it, Miguel. My laptop was about to die, but I said, let me switch it over real quick. But yeah, like I was saying, just the psychoeducation. Like I do, even with my student athletes, I do a lot of how the brain works. A lot of us don't know how the brain works and what causes anxiety. And I think just the biggest thing is just having that psychoeducation to kill that stigma. Like a lot of the times is, we don't want to feel weak. I know I didn't. When I was in school and I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Like I didn't want anyone to know, because I felt like I wasn't smarter than everyone, or I wasn't as good as everyone around me. So I think just killing that stigma, letting your child know that, it's okay to be anxious, but what it's not okay is to isolate, or it's okay to have depression, but what is not okay is to not engage in things that you want to do every day. So just kind of breaking down that psychoeducation, making them feel supported. Knowing your child as well. Like with my kids, I can tell my oldest, he plays football on a high competitive level. I can tell when he's overthinking because he's not doing the basic things that he would normally do. So when I see him doing those things, side of it, like take a deep breath, use your tools, right? Use your breathing techniques. So just giving them those tools early as children, so when they're adult, they know how to manage their anger and emotions. We don't have events like school shootings or violent acts that we've been seeing, because a lot of that just not having the emotional regulation skills as a child.
I cannot tell you how impactful this conversation has been, and I hope for our fan members that are watching, and for those that will be listening to this later on, that they glean something for their kids or for themselves. And I think the biggest takeaway is to just really listen to your body. Because so much of our society is just go. There's another deadline, there's another bill, there's another event. But sometimes you really have to do the work to just stop and say, Am I okay?
Right.
Am I walking through molasses? Does it feel like I'm slowing down? Am I doing what I need to do? Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences, because I know, like you said, Fonda, you're traumatizing yourself again by having to tell it, but you're helping so many people by telling that story.
Well, thank y'all for having us, and I really appreciate it. And I hope this conversation is not just going to be a conversation. I hope it's going to be a call to action, to be a little bit kinder, to treat people how you'd like to be treated, because a smile can hide a lot of pain.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, 100%. Fonda, do you give out your information, or if someone
Sure
wants to?
do.
Okay. How can
Yeah,
people?
you sure did. Like Holly said, I reached out to her. So yeah, you can reach out to me on Instagram as Proud Mom 72 and Twitter Proud Mom 72. You can find me under Fonda Bryant as well. But please reach out. I always reach back out to people, and I don't mind helping people because, as I said, I'm alive to do that, and I'm grateful. And again, everybody needs an Aunt Spanky. Everybody needs to be like Aunt Spanky.
Amen to Aunt Spank, girl. Yeah.
Well, thank y'all. I'll tell her.
Yeah.
Thank y'all, guys.
Thank you, Fonda.
Thank you.
We so
Thank y'all.
appreciate you.
And Marcus, how can people get into contact with you?
Yes, on Instagram it's freeminded_wellness. And on the Instagram account, if you go to the top, you can see my Psychology Today profile, and you can that, and you can make a referral. If I'm an individual, I'm the type of person of you come to me and I can't provide services for you if I'm not, specialized or trained in maybe your mental health condition. I'll refer you to many of my colleagues here in the Charlotte area. So definitely follow me on Instagram. And then I have a personal Instagram, skateboard_MJG.
Marcus, thank you so very much. We appreciate it, and go enjoy your weekend.
Yes, thank you so much, Marcus.
I'll hear y'all tomorrow. Well, Monday for sure.
Monday. We'll be back.
Yeah.
Talk to you later, Marcus. And then some of the comments that we have coming in. Zinda said, this podcast has been so helpful and informative. Thank you.
I want to point out Chavez Rosa particularly because I think that she missed the beginning of the podcast when Fonda was talking about this exact thing. So she says, it sucks to have depression. I have postpartum depression and anxiety, and it's not the best. It's been so hard, but God will help. Just have faith. God is not going to fix your depression. And that's not a dig on God.
No.
God gives you the tools to help yourself.
Right.
So you can't wait for God to make it better. God is telling you now, take this podcast as a sign from God.
Right.
That you have to take that step and ask for help from a doctor, from a family member, from somebody that you trust, because I've been through postpartum depression and it is relentless, I think is a good word. So reach out, find somebody that you can talk to that you feel safe with, and just start to take some steps to help yourself, because we just need you here. We just need you here.
And that's the hardest part, is those little steps. But once you start and you get a routine going, it gets so much better.
Yes.
Stefan said, thank you both so much to Fonda and Marcus. And then David said, very impactful podcast today. Thank you for putting on this format, and thank you to the guests for sharing.
It's been a long time coming, y'all. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we had talked about having these two on in May. And then life happens a little bit sometimes. But we were able to cobble it together for September. So at least there's that. But it's been a long time in the works, and I'm so glad they could both make it on the same day.
100.
And then it worked, and it can be really hard. I feel like I've been struggling a lot lately, and I told my person, and we're making plans in place to have some new treatment for me. But it's it can be embarrassing, because I'm I'm the mental health person. I already talked about all this stuff years ago. I should be better. That's really not how it works. And I know that, but
it's a whole different thing.
It sucks
when it's
you in. Your brain tells you lies.
Right.
So
100%. I have a
changes.
whole and I have a whole segment we're gonna do on the radio some point next week that I finally had to say, wait a minute, I don't think I'm okay. Because sort of what Fonda was saying, I was identifying with, since my friend passed, where I've like, normally I'm like, all right, I understand it. I feel it. I get it.
Logically,
Let's move on.
you understand it, right?
Right. But then when it's like, I just want to sit and lay down for the day and I don't want to do anything. And I haven't been wanting to do my Peloton. I haven't want to go to CrossFit. And I'm like, all right, now is the time to do it. But you have to recognize and you have to listen to yourself to be able to know these things.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can be really scary too, especially when you have like potentially like suicidal ideations.
Yeah.
Which I do. I
Right.
do. And it's embarrassing. It feels embarrassing to say that because it also feels like, oh no, well, I have to jump to a hospital or something right now. Well, it's like, no, I recognize it. But I'm like, well, what is the best path for me to help with that right now? So like I said, like you talk to a safe, trusted person and then you take one step at a time, sometimes with they're giving you a slight push
Right.
to do the right thing for you and look into whatever it is you need to.
Yeah, it's been really hard for me because we document our lives so much on this show, and
Sorry,
so
I talk past the bed.
That's fine.
Put me bed on.
Okay.
There we go.
New bed.
Okay.
I was just saying that it's really hard because I also as well is going through some depression right now, and you'd think everything around is going great. What do you have to be depressed about? But it's so weird because I can recall listening to old podcasts and I'm like, man, I'm sounding real happy, and now it's like these episodes go on, I feel like I'm going back to a low space again. But I feel like palate cleanser is what we talked about earlier today. That's what I feel like this podcast did for me, which is good.
Right. And you never know. Like, I
good.
feel like there's a reason. Like, this sort of just came together happenstance, where we got both of them on together. And so like what you said, Holly, is that sometimes things happen in the universe for it all to come together. And this whole 50 plus minutes of us chatting is for so many different people. And the universe said, this is when this was going to be the most impactful.
It needs to be now.
Right.
For whoever it needs to be now for. And Chavez Rosa did an addendum who said, sorry if it came out wrong, but I have reached out for the help. I was just saying it sucks and it's been one day at a time. That's good.
Right.
I'm glad you have. I just want you to actually take some tangible help instead of just hoping that. Yeah. So I'm really glad to hear that.
And Joe I said, don't be embarrassed about knowing yourself and recognizing when things aren't right with you.
Yeah.
Producer Kelvin, what's all your social media?
You can follow me on TikTok, X, Instagram at Kelvin Live.
Holly O'Connor.
Radio Holly for all of my things.
And mine is at Miguel Fuller for Be Real. Instagram, X, Threads. I'm gonna start getting back into Threads. That's on my to-do list for September.
I know Doeye's over here threading us all the time. We got to get on it.
Oh, girl. Well, now that they have a desktop app, I can pull it up while we're here.
Yeah, that's what makes it hard because I'm not checking my phone all the time.
Yeah, so we'll do it.
Yeah, desktop.
All right, we will see you all on Monday. Bye.
Miguel and Holly Uncensored.
Catch it